Hello YouTube! We're on the real programming channel about HTML and CSS for beginners. And I'm its host, my name is Andrei, I greet you, welcome, and this is our 98th lesson. We will talk about styling the form with CSS. Okay, we got all the structure we need. So, now we just need to add a few styling rules and we'll be done. Because this form is part of the starbuzz site, we are going to use some of this style in the starbuzz CSS style sheet and create a new style sheet styled form.css to add new style rules for the bean meshing form. All of this CSS should be familiar to you now. We're not using any rules unique to form, it's all just the same stuff you've been using in the last few chapters. You'll find this CSS in the file styledform.css in the folder chapter 14 starbuzz. We are going to rely on the starbuzz CSS for some of our style, but we are adding the starbuzz background image and the margin to the body. We're using the form to represent the table in the table display and adding a border around the form and some padding between the form content and the border and the background color to offset it from the background. We are making the text area control in the form bigger, so there is more room for comments by setting its weight and height. Each table row div acts as row in the table display layout. Each p element that is nested in the table row div is a table cell. We vertically align the content in each p, so the content in each row lines up at the top of the cells. And we are adding a bit of padding here to add space between the rows. This rule uses the first child pseudo class element 1, the selector for p elements nested inside table row divs. This means the first p element in each row is aligned to the right, so they all line up vertically against the right side of the column. And for any p elements with the class heading, we bold the text so it looks like a heading. We use this in the ship to cell. Test driving the style form. You're going to add two link elements to the head of your HTML and the styled form HTML, linking in the starbuzz style sheet from chapter 12 starbuzz CSS and your new style sheet styled form CSS. Make sure you get the order correct. Link the starbuzz CSS file first, then the styled form CSS. Once you got the two style sheets linked and save and reload your page, you should see the snazzy styled version of the starbuzz bean meshing in your browser. Wow, what a difference a little style makes! If you want to stretch your HTML and CSS skills a bit, see if you can add the starbuzz header and footer to the bean meshing page and make the bean meshing look really nice with those elements. The bean meshing from now matches the rest of the starbuzz site better. The labels are aligned with the top of the form elements and they're aligned to the right as well. This alignment makes it easier to see which labels belong with which controls. The ship to heading is bold, just like we wanted. The space between the rows makes a big difference and makes the form much easier to read. We've got two columns and all the content in the rows lines up nicely. A word about accessibility. Okay, so far we've been labeling our form element with simple text, but we should really be using the label element to mark up these labels. The label element provides further information about the structure of your page, allows you to style your labels using CSS more easily, and helps screen readers for the visually impaired to correctly identify form elements. We have created a complete version of the bean meshing with labels and updated the CSS to go with it. Check out access form HTML and access form CSS in the code downloads. To use label elements, first add an ID attribute to your form element. Now the text next to the this radio buttons is label. So to use label elements, first add an attribute ID to your form element. The ID add a label and set its for attribute to the corresponding ID. By default, labels don't look any different from just normal text. However, they can make a big difference when it comes to accessibility. You can use the label elements with any form control. So we can add a label to each part of our bean machine form. For instance, we could add a label to the number input for a number of bags like this. We added the ID bags to the input element. It's okay to have the name and ID attributes use the same value, in this case bags. When you add these labels to the radio or checkbox controlling, remember that the ID of each control needs to be unique, even though the name of all the controls in the group is the same. So to add labels to the bean type radio control in the bean machine, create unique IDs for both the whole and the ground option. The name of both controls is a bean type, so they are grouped together when you submit the form to the server script, but each it needs to be unique. Notice that the label can come before or after the control is associated with the long, as the value of the for attribute matches the ID. It doesn't matter where the label is. What more could possibly go into a form? We've covered just about everything you'll regularly use in your forms, but there are a few more items you might want to consider adding to your form repertoire. We're including them here just in case you want to take in your own studies even future. File set and legends. When your forms start getting large, it can be helpful to visually group elements together. While you might use divs and CSS to do this, HTML also provides a file set element that can be used to group together common element. File set makes use of a second element called legend. Here's how they work together. The field set elements surround the set of input elements. The legend provides a label for the group. Here's how the field set and legend look in one browser. You'll find that the browser displays them differently. Passwords. The passwords input elements work just like the text input element, except that the text you type is masked. This is useful for forms that require you to type in a password a secret code or other sensitive information that you may not want that other people to see as you type. Keep in mind, however, that the form data is not sent from the browser to the server script in a secure way unless you make it secure. For more on security, contact your hosting company. The password input elements works exactly like the text input elements, except the text your type is masked. More things that can go in a form. File input. Here as a whole, new input element we haven't talked about. If you need to send the entire file into server script, you'll once again use the input element, but this time set its type to file. When you do that, the input elements creates a control that allows you to select a file, and when the form is submitted, the contents of the file are sent with the rest of your form data to the server. Remember, your server script will need to be expecting a file upload, and so also note that you must use the post method to use this element. Here's what the file input element looks like. A couple of different browsers. To create a file input element, just set the type of the input element to file. Multiple selection. This isn't an element, but rather a new way to use an element you already know. If you add a boolean attribute multiple to your select element, you turn your single choice menu into multiple choice menu. Instead of pop-down menu, you'll get a multiple choice menu that shows all the options to the screen with a scroll bar. If there are a lot of them, you can choose more than one of holding down the control or command mark windows. Okay, placeholder. You can use placeholder attribute with most of the input types in the form. Give the person who's filling in the form a hint about the kind of content you expect him to enter into. Control, for instance, if you have a text field that expects a first and last name, you can provide the same first and last name using the placeholder attribute. The value in the attribute is shown in the control but is fainter than normal content. You added the control, and as soon as you click into the text field, the placeholder text will disappear, so it doesn't get in the way of what you're typing. Required. This is an attribute you can use the form control. It indicates that this field required, so you shouldn't submit the form without specifying the value of the controls that you have this attribute set in a browser that supported this attribute. If you try to submit the form without specifying a value of required field, you get an error message and the form will not be submitted to the browser. Server. Notice that the attribute is another boolean attribute, like we saw in the video element. That just means that value of attribute is simply there, is not there. Set this attribute there, then is set in the attribute not there, then it's not set. So in this example, required is there, so that means the attribute is set and the field required submit. So finally, of this chapter HTML forms bullet points, we will talk about this in the next lesson. This is our 98th lesson over. Thanks for watching. Subscribe my channel and put like, share with friends, comment. Thanks for watching. Bye.